Hello my friends, it is Gene. I'm back again for another one about the PC-12 again today. Thought I would talk to you about the ice control systems on the PC-12, how they work, and what my experience has been with them. So I thought the easiest way of doing this would be to jump into X-Plane 11 here. This is the Coronado PC-12 again, and I'll just use this to explain things as we go through. So we've got several different systems on the airplane to control ice. First and foremost, we have the de-icing boots along the leading edges of each wing, which are these black rubber boots here along the leading edges of the left and the right wings, and then also on the horizontal stabilizer up here, we have a boot. And the vertical stabilizer is not booted. It's not protected from ice. It doesn't have to be. And inside of these rubber boots, we have some plumbing, and there are these little inflatable tubes in there, and they're inflated by bleed air from the engine, and when they're inflated, they just inflate and break away the ice that's accumulated on the leading edges of the wings, and they let that ice be carried away by the slipstream. So it's just a way of inflating those little ribs to break up the ice and let it fly off the airplane. We also have propeller heat. These are electrical boots on the first third of each propeller blade along the roots here. Those just heat up and prevent ice from forming on the prop. They can also de-ice if there is already ice on the propeller blades. We have the heated lip here on the intake. That's heated by exhaust. We have windshield heat that's electrical on both of these front panes. The side windows are not heated, it's just the front panes. And then we also have probe heat for our AOA vanes and the pitot tubes on each side and the static vents on the back. And then last but not least, we have our little ice inspection light, which is only on the left side, so that at night we can turn that on and we can see the leading edge of the wing here to see if we're accumulating any ice on the wing, or if we know we have ice, to see how well it's cleaning up if the boots are working for us. So we'll talk about the boots here a little bit, and I'll take you into the cockpit to show you the switch for these. So up here, this is a Series 10, so we have everything on the overhead panel up here for our ice control systems. And over here, we have our boots master switch. So if we turn that on, a little arrow pointer will illuminate, and we can choose either between the 1 minute or the 3 minute option. And the difference between those is if we're on the 1 minute option, we would use that in heavier icing conditions. And what that means is every 60 seconds, a new cycle of the boots will start. So I'll take you back outside and we'll look at how that works. So we don't have enough bleed air to just inflate all the boots at once. So we have an inflation cycle that's controlled by a timer. So when we hit that button in the cockpit, if we're going to use the 1 minute cycle, the first thing the computer's going to do is take bleed air and route it into the tail. So the ejector valve is going to open up and shoot bleed air that's preconditioned to remove any water from it, and it gets it to about 14.5 psi so that we're not going to blow the boots up, and it routes it in here to the boot on each side of the horizontal stabilizer, and that lasts for 8 seconds. So it's going to inflate and then slowly deflate. That takes 8 seconds, and then it's going to come here to the lower surface of the inboard section of each boot. And the boots are sectioned on the wing. I think it's about right here somewhere. It's about halfway down the wing or so where the sections are divided. So the inboard section right here on the lower surface on each side is going to inflate. That takes 8 seconds again. So inflate, deflate, that takes 8 seconds. And then the upper surface, inboard, left and right for 8 seconds. And then the outboard, left and right, lower side for 8 seconds. And then the outboard, upper, left and right for 8 seconds. So you have 5 different sections, each taking 8 seconds. So 5 times 8 is 40. That's a 40-second complete cycle for all of that to occur. So when we're on the 1 minute setting, the timer is going to take 20 seconds off after that 40-second cycle has completed to give us a total of 60 seconds before it starts the process all over again. So again, we would use that if we were in heavier icing conditions, like moderate icing. If we're on light icing or just a trace, just a little bit of ice, we'll come up here and we'll do the 3 minute setting. And same exact thing occurs on the outside, but instead of starting again after only 20 seconds, the computer will wait 140 seconds to give us the 40-second cycle to complete, and then 140-second delay, so that's 180 seconds, which is 3 minutes before a new cycle is started. So it's automatic. Once you hit the button, the computer and the timer it takes over, and the boots just keep cycling either on the 1 minute or the 3 minute cycles, whichever you choose. Now the manual says to go ahead and cycle the boots anytime that the airplane is in icing conditions, period. You don't have to wait for ice to accumulate first to run the boots. So in training they teach you to just go ahead and cycle the boots anytime that you're in ice. However, most of us that have flown the airplane quite a bit know that that is actually not really the best way of running the boots. It's usually better, and this is true really in any airplane that has boots, it's usually better to wait for about a 1/4 inch or maybe a little less than a 1/4 inch of ice to accumulate on the leading edges of the wings first before you cycle the boots. And the reason for that is because the ice will actually break apart and fly away more effectively with a little bit of more ice accumulation. They clean up a little bit more nicely if you wait. And in fact, in the old days when boots were new technology, there was a risk of what's known as ice bridging. And ice bridging means that when the boot inflates, if you're still flying in active icing conditions, ice can form along the contour of the inflated ribs of the boot and then stay that way, and then the boot would deflate, leaving essentially a small cave of ice. And so when the boot inflates the next time, it's just inflating into that empty space, and it's coming up and just touching that new layer of ice, but it's not actually breaking it apart. So the boots would be rendered useless when that occurred. So back in the early days of boots, they would tell everyone, not to cycle the boots until you had a 1/4 inch of ice, or maybe even a little bit more than that, so that the boots you wouldn't get that ice bridging. And that's not really so much a concern anymore. The technology has improved, but it does still work a little bit better to do that. So you don't want to wait till you have too much ice on the airplane, because that starts to get dangerous, because you're changing the shape of the airfoil, you're raising the stall speed, you don't want to mess with that. But you do want to wait till you get a little bit of a thin layer of ice before you pop the boots, ideally. So anyway, that's a little bit about the boots. So up here, again on the propeller, we have the electrical boots. If you can see these right here. These just heat up. There's a switch in the cockpit. Let's see if we can show you that. And it's just a button right up here at the top. Prop heat. It's just on or off. And in the 4-blade prop, how this works, since you want a symmetrical shedding of ice so that you don't get a propeller imbalance, these two blades, so opposing blades for instance, these two right here, these will cycle first. You don't have enough electrical power to cycle all 4 at once. So it would be these two first, and then these two, and then these two, and then these two. So you're always keeping things symmetrical when the ice starts to shed, so you don't get propeller vibration. On a 5-blade prop, since you have an odd number of blades, you can't do that, so it's inner and outer. The boots themselves have sections, and the inner section on all 5 blades runs first, and then the outer section on all 5 blades runs second, and it just keeps alternating like that so long as you have the prop heat turned on. Let's see, and then the probe heat, let's see, go back inside. Keep getting my key shortcuts messed up. Let's see. Probe heat is right here. It's just a button we press on or off, and that will just send electrical current out to the heaters on the AOA vanes and the pitot tubes and the static vents. So I'll take you outside and try to show you those as best I can. You can see the pitot tubes. I don't think it's modeled correctly on here. I don't see a pitot tube on this side, but anyway, it's going to heat up the pitot tube and the AOA vanes. The AOA vanes are right here, and then you've got a couple static vents on the back right there, and there's one on the opposite side as well. So those will all be heated up. And then the windshield heat, again, only heats these 2 front panes, and there's a light and a heavy setting, left and right up here. So here's light and heavy, and left is on top, right is on the bottom. We usually use light. Light will heat up the entire pane. Heavy will just heat up the middle third. So if you're having a really bad day and you're in some serious ice and light isn't shedding the ice off the windshield, you could go to heavy, and you're just going to get this little strip right here cleared just enough to where you can see the runway and land, but it's not going to be it's not going to be a great time. I haven't flown an icing in this airplane that's been so bad that I've needed to use the heavy option on that, although I have used it for defog many times, and it does a pretty good job of that when the light just isn't really cutting it. So the probe heat and the windshield heat, we will turn that on before takeoff on every single flight, regardless of whether or not we're anticipating flying into icing conditions, just because it doesn't hurt anything. So we'll turn probes on, windshield heat on, light on both sides. And, flying the PC-12, we often fly up into the flight levels. Chances are we're going to probably fly through some clouds at some point each flight. Doesn't always happen, but it might. And we don't want to forget to turn on the probe heat. Plus, we're flying up in really, really cold air up in the flight levels, and that stuff should just be on anyway. That way we're not getting any chance of any ice on the probes. And on the windshield, again, since we're flying up in really cold air in the flight levels, this will actually get a little bit brittle here. The windshield is going to get a little brittle if we're not heating it. So heating those panes actually keeps the windscreen a little bit more elastic, and it's less likely to shatter and break like if you have a bird strike. So it's just good to have that on no matter what. So those aren't something we really have to think about during flight. We turn those on before flight and then off after we land. Now the prop heat and the boots will turn on as needed based on whether or not we're actually going to be flying into icing conditions. The inertial separator does also have to be open during flight and icing conditions. That way, if there is any ice that accumulates, we don't risk it breaking off and coming into the air intake and then actually damaging the engine. So we leave the separator open for that. And again, this lip here for the air intake right here is actually heated by exhaust. So the exhaust actually runs through this. There's a little duct in here, a little tube, and it runs through there and out the right stack to keep this heated at all times. And there's no switch for this in the cockpit or anything. It's just always heated no matter what. So that should prevent any ice from forming on the lip, but you never know if you could form ice somewhere else on the propeller or the spinner and have it come in. So we just always fly with the separator open in icing conditions. So anyway, I have flown the PC-12 in quite a bit of ice. I haven't had any issues with it. It does very well in ice. I haven't had any unusual buffeting or sluggishness. It does very well. The boots do a pretty nice job of keeping the leading edges clean, and really no complaints. It's a great airplane. It can handle it quite well. Before we do fly the airplane into known icing conditions, if we have any chance of doing that during a flight before we take off, we're going to test these systems to make sure that they work on the ground. And we always want to pre-flight the boots because these actually are subject to getting little tears in them. It's just a rubber boot, and so if you have a tear in the boot, it can leak the bleed air out and fail to do its job, and I actually have had that happen a couple of times. When we're doing the walk around, we want to look at the boots and check for any tears, and then once we get in the airplane and have the engine running, we'll actually cycle the boots to make sure that they're inflating and that we don't get a cause light or a cast light, depending on whether we're in the Legacy here or in the NG, to make sure that the system has checked everything, to make sure that we're getting good pressure in the boots, that the timer's working, everything's looking good. And then also forgot to mention too, one thing on the walk around that you can check is for a nice coating of Ice-X. There are different products out there on the market. Ice-X is a common one that people will use on the boots. It's just a treatment that you put on the boots to keep them nice and slick, and it just helps the ice slide off those boots more easily after the inflation cycle. If you do have ice on there, it'll just kind of slide right off. So yeah, the boots should be in good condition, no tears, nice and shiny and slippery and ready to go. All right, guys, I think that is it. Let me know if you have any questions, any other ideas for videos, and thanks so much for watching. Hit the subscribe button if you don't mind. That helps me out a lot if you're liking this kind of stuff. And don't forget to like the video and leave me a comment if you would. Love hearing from you guys. And that's it for now. Cheers. See you on the next video.